Have you ever stood in a room where the air itself seemed to liquefy, where the floor dropped out from under your understanding of what a song is supposed to be, leaving you floating downstream in a sonic current so alien yet so primal that it felt like remembering a future you haven't lived yet? That is the question you must ask yourself before you dare to drop the needle on the final track of Revolver. We are not here to talk about a pop song. We are not here to discuss a catchy melody or a cute lyrical rhyme scheme about holding hands. We are here to dissect a sonic cataclysm, a deliberate murder of the conventional 3-minute single, and the subsequent resurrection of rock and roll as high art. Tomorrow Never Knows is not just a track. It is the line in the sand where the Beatles stopped being a band you watched scream on Ed Sullivan and became architects of the modern auditory experience. If you are comfortable with the sanitized, grid-snapped, auto-tuned sterility of modern radio, you should stop reading now. This is going to get dirty, technical, and undeniably loud. To understand why this piece of music is a masterpiece, you have to strip away the myth and look at the mechanics, because the genius lies in the grease and the gears. In 1966, the musical landscape was still largely defined by diatonic harmony, predictable verse-chorus structures, and the limitation of 4-track recording. The Beatles, exhausted by the screaming mania of touring where they couldn't hear themselves play, retreated into Abbey Road with a singular, unspoken mission: to create sounds that had never existed before. John Lennon didn't walk in and say, "I want to write a song." He walked in, likely fueled by the psychedelic dissolution of his own ego via LSD and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and essentially said to producer George Martin, "I want to sound like the Dalai Lama chanting from a mountaintop, surrounded by 4,000 monks." Most producers would have laughed. George Martin and the young engineer Geoff Emerick, however, were not most producers. They were technicians who understood that to capture the sound of the void, you have to break the machine. Let's talk about the harmonic foundation, or rather, the lack of one. In Western music, movement is life. You go from the tonic to the dominant, you create tension and resolution. Tomorrow Never Knows spits on that tradition. It is built on a drone. A single, relentless, hypnotic C-chord foundation that never changes, never resolves, and never apologizes. This is where the casual listener gets bored, but the musician gets terrified. Writing a song with 3 chords is easy. The changes do the work for you. Writing a song with 1 chord requires you to generate interest through timbre, texture, and rhythmic intensity alone. It forces the ear to stop listening for the next part and start listening to the now. This is the influence of Indian classical music, specifically the tamboura drone that George Harrison was immersed in, but applied with the aggression of a Western rhythm section. By using a mixolydian mode, that flattened 7th giving it a bluesy, ancient resolve against the C major, the track sits in a state of suspended animation. It is static harmony weaponized. Now focus your ear on the drums. If you think Ringo Starr is a mediocre drummer, you are not just wrong. You are failing to understand the function of percussion in a recorded medium. On this track, Ringo provides one of the most sampled, imitated, and heavy breakbeats in history. This isn't jazz. This isn't swing. It is a proto-industrial loop played by a human. The sound is thick, dead, and massive. They achieved this by doing something sacrilegious at the time. They dampened the drum heads heavily, often using woolen clothing or tea towels. And, crucially, Geoff Emerick moved the microphones right up to the skins. The EMI rulebook explicitly forbade this because the air pressure could damage the expensive ribbon mics. Emerick did it anyway. The result is a thud that hits you in the chest rather than the ears. The pattern Ringo plays is a stuttering, syncopated ostinato that refuses to settle, creating a rolling, tumbling sensation. He is not keeping time, he is driving a tank through the song. But the true avant-garde nature of this beast lies in the atmosphere, the swirling, shrieking winds that tear across the stereo field. These were not synthesizers. Synthesizers in 1966 were room-sized monstrosities that the Beatles didn't use here. Those sounds are tape loops, Paul McCartney, often unfairly painted as the safe balladeer, was actually the one diving deep into the underground world of musique concrète and the works of Karlheinz Stockhausen. He realized that if you removed the erase head from a tape recorder, the sound would pile up on itself, saturating into a distorted mess. The band members went home and created random loops, recordings of a distorted guitar, a slowed-down laughing voice, an orchestral B-flat chord on a mellotron setting, and then manipulated them. They brought these loops into the studio, and what happened next was a performance of technology. They threaded these loops through multiple tape machines in different rooms, all feeding back into the main mixing desk. The engineers had to hold the loops taut with pencils to keep the tension. During the final mix, they played the mixing console like an instrument, fading these chaotic sounds in and out in real time. That screaming seagull sound that cuts through the mix, that is widely identified as a distorted guitar loop, sped up and manipulated until it lost all resemblance to a stringed instrument. It is an organized chaos that sounds different every time you listen, because your brain cannot latch onto a pattern. There is no pattern. It is randomness captured in amber. Then there is the vocal. Lennon wanted to sound distinct, distant, otherworldly. The standard practice of the day would be to add a little reverb or echo. Instead, they ran his vocal track through a Leslie speaker cabinet. For the uninitiated, a Leslie is designed for Hammond organs. It contains a rotating drum and horn that physically spin around, throwing the sound in 360 degrees to create a warbling Doppler effect tremolo. Putting a vocal through it was unheard of. It required physically rewiring the studio equipment. The result is a voice that sounds like it is coming from inside your own skull, vibrating with a mechanical flutter that mimics the vibration of the nervous system itself. It is the sound of a man trying to communicate from a different dimension. We must also address the bass guitar. Paul stays on that high C, anchoring the chaos, but the tone is compressed to within an inch of its life. Compression reduces the dynamic range, bringing the quiet parts up and the loud parts down, creating a solid brick of sound. This allows the bass to cut through the dense fog of tape loops and cymbal crashes. It's a relentless pulse, the heartbeat of the trip. And what of the guitar solo? It breaks the laws of physics. Paul McCartney recorded a searing, frantic guitar solo specifically for this track, but in the final mix, the tape was flipped. We are hearing the recording played backwards. Backwards audio has a unique envelope. The sound starts with the decay and ends with the sharp attack of the pick, creating a sucking, swelling effect. It feels disorienting because it violates our biological expectation of cause and effect. We hear the result before the action. This was not a gimmick. It was a textural necessity to match the lyrical theme of the void. Lyrically, Lennon stripped away the teenage romance entirely. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. These are instructions for ego death, adapted from the Leary Alpert interpretation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He is singing about the end of the self, the realization that it is not dying. In the context of 1966, where the charts were dominated by the Supremes and the Monkees, this was a radical act of philosophical warfare. He was demanding the listener to stop consuming and start being. The interplay between this ancient spiritual directive and the violently modern mechanical backing track creates a cognitive dissonance that is absolutely electrifying. It is the sound of the ancient past colliding with the distant future. The production techniques utilized here, automatic double tracking, ADT, to thicken the vocals without singing twice, vari-speed recording to alter the timbre of the instruments, and the use of the studio board as a performance instrument, became the blueprint for psychedelic rock, heavy metal, and electronic music. Every time you hear a sampled drum break, every time you hear a reversed vocal, every time you hear a producer use the studio to manipulate sound rather than just capture it, you are hearing the echoes of Tomorrow Never Knows. This track is a masterpiece not because it is pretty, but because it is fearless. It abandons the safety of the diatonic scale and the comfort of the love song to explore the terrifying potential of pure sound. It is a dense, claustrophobic, exhilarating wall of noise that demands your full attention. It doesn't ask for your approval. It commands your submission. It is a reminder that music is not just entertainment. It is a physical force, a vibration that can alter consciousness. The Beatles walked into that studio as a pop band and walked out as shamans of the electric age. If you can listen to this track and not feel the ground shift beneath your feet, then you aren't listening close enough. You are just hearing, and there is a world of difference.